Imagine moving to America because you believe in the American dream. You find a job, then another. You work nights, you work weekends, you do everything you're supposed to do, and yet you still can't afford a home. For many Europeans, this sounds almost impossible, because one of the most powerful assumptions about America is simple. If you work hard enough, you can build a better life. But in 2026, millions of Americans are discovering a much more complicated reality. And the biggest shock isn't that America has poverty. Every country does. The shock is how hard some Americans are working while still struggling to stay financially secure. Consider the numbers. The latest U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development report counted 745,652 people experiencing homelessness on a single night in January 2025, including 266,320 people living without shelter. But homelessness is only the most visible part of the story. The deeper problem begins much earlier, when working people realize their paycheck is disappearing almost as quickly as it arrives. The U.S. Census Bureau puts the 2024 national median gross rent at $1,487 a month, and more than 21 million renter households spent over 30% of their income on housing in 2023, nearly half of the renter households for which the census calculated rent burden. To a European watching this, the question becomes obvious. How can someone be working and still be unable to afford a place to live? The answer becomes clearer when you look at wages. The federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour in 2026. At 40 hours a week for a full year, that's only about $15,080 before taxes. Of course, many states have higher minimum wages, and millions of Americans earn considerably more. But the contradiction remains. Having a job and having financial security are not the same thing. The Federal Reserve's latest household survey, covering 2025 and released in 2026, found that 16% of American adults had not paid all their bills in the previous month. 8% said their families sometimes or often didn't have enough to eat, and 26% said they had skipped medical care because of the cost. Even more revealing, 59% experienced at least one major unexpected expense during the previous year. That is the part Europeans may find hardest to understand. A person doesn't necessarily fall into financial trouble because they refuse to work. Sometimes they fall because the car breaks, the rent rises, a child needs something, a medical bill arrives, or the hours at work suddenly disappear. And then the entire budget collapses. As James Baldwin famously observed, anyone who has ever struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to be poor. And nowhere is that more visible than housing. The competitor story gives us a human face for these numbers. Germania worked multiple jobs while raising her children. After long shifts, she returned not to a comfortable family home, but a motel room. She described trying to save enough money for an apartment while paying hundreds of dollars every month simply to remain in the motel. Her children had to treat that tiny room as home. For a mother, however, it wasn't home. It was survival. And that creates one of the strangest American culture shocks. You can be employed, exhausted, responsible, and still be housing insecure. And America isn't just expensive at the bottom. The traditional middle-class dream can also be surprisingly fragile. The competitor's story follows workers at General Electric who had spent years building careers, only to receive layoffs as companies searched for lower costs. One worker had devoted 13 years to the company. His reward for all those years wasn't retirement security, it was a termination notice. He described walking through the workplace while his colleagues watched, knowing exactly why he was being escorted out. That isn't just losing a paycheck, it's losing certainty. And perhaps that's the real story behind the American dream in 2026. Americans still believe in it. A major 2026 Gallup Milken survey of more than 6,300 Americans found that 28% associated the American dream with financial security or homeownership, while 18% connected it with success or upward mobility. So the dream isn't dead, but for many people it feels farther away. And here's the strange irony. America still sells the dream at a very reasonable price. The dream itself is free. It's the house that comes with it that's expensive.
Because the real American dream isn't necessarily a mansion or a sports car. It's something much simpler. A stable job, a safe home, food in the refrigerator, a little money left after the bills, and enough security to know that one broken car won't destroy the family budget. That is why the working poor story matters. It isn't simply about people who have nothing. It's about people who have something, but not enough security to breathe. And perhaps the most powerful question isn't whether the American dream still exists. It does. The question is, who can still afford to reach it? Because if working hard is supposed to be the road to the American dream, what happens when working hard is no longer enough? For Europeans watching from across the Atlantic, perhaps that is the biggest culture shock of all. America can offer enormous opportunity, but opportunity and security are not the same thing. And sometimes the person working hardest in the room is the person who is still one unexpected bill away from losing everything. That's the part of America the postcards don't show.